for modules 5 and 6. We thought it would be a good idea, based on feedback we've received from RS101 students, to walk our way through the sources and show you how to read a title page. Sometimes it's not as easy as it may seem at the surface. So I'm going to try to walk you through looking at these bibliography sources. We'll try to show you where to get help for each of these bibliographical sources in this file for modules 5 and 6. This file is found in the module 5 and 6 bibliography sources in the course files for RS101. Let's take a look at these files. The first source, titled The Historical Development of Fundamental Moral Theology in the United States, is an example of an edited book, so be sure to look at the 8th edition sections 17.1.1.2 about the editors. So Charles Curran and Richard McCormick are the editors for this one. By the way, SJ is an honorific stating that or indicating that Mr. McCormick is a member of the Jesuit Society. The tricky thing here about this, other than listing these men as the editors, is that Readings in Moral Theology number 11 reflects a series title. So Readings in Moral Theology is the series, 11 is the series volume. Now moving on to number 2, we're citing the 7th edition of Kate Turabian's A Manual for Writers of Research Papers, Theses, and Dissertations. You'll notice in the title here there's the Oxford comma. I would typeset it this way. Some people really insist on the Oxford comma, others don't. But you will also see here below the title the moniker Chicago Style for Students and Researchers. I would ignore that. I wouldn't consider that part of the title or consider that the subtitle. I try to omit, as a matter of principle, anything that looks like marketing jargon to me. The 7th edition, of course, is the edition before the one you're using, but the 7th edition, of course, is the one we're having you cite here, although the 8th edition is the most current. These bibliographical sources are from previous iterations of the course and should be updated by the time the fall course for RS101, the fall of 2016, rolls around. So the author's name is Kate Turabian, and there's a number of different editors, so I think it'd probably be better to consider this Wayne Booth et alii, the Latin abbreviation for and others, to employ that here. But the work is still very much the work of Kate Turabian, so we honor her in the author slot for this work. Moving to source number 3, we're looking at a section of the Bible Knowledge Commentary, the Old Testament volume on this. Of course, this is a 2-volume commentary on all the Bible. It's volume 1 is what I would consider the Old Testament volume, and volume 2 the New Testament volume. We're citing the chapter by Donald Campbell, Donald K. Campbell. It runs pages 325 to 371. Of course, that's the correct notation for the page numbers there. That 71 indicates 371, of course. And the chapter is Joshua. So cite this as a component part by one author in an edited book, and treat this as volume 1. And again, I would not consider an exposition of the scriptures by Dallas Seminary faculty as part of the title. That's marketing jargon. Source number 4 is an online journal article. Although many online journal articles can be cited simply as though you had opened them up and looked at them, when you get full text PDF citations of these, it'll work pretty well. But in the upper left hand corner you can see JETS 45/1. 45 is the journal volume, 1 is the issue number, and it indicates that it was published in March 2002. That's pages 3 to 33. The article by Darrell Bach. And the title, of course, is The Purpose-Driven ETS. Subtitle, Where Should We Go? Another subtitle, A Look at Jesus Studies and Other Example Cases. Down below, we can see that the notation is asking you to follow the Shapiro example in 17.2.7. That's the 7th edition. The current edition, the 8th edition, we would follow section 17.2.5. And I would say the Hitchcock example would be good here. Although that URL, I have to say, is rather unwieldy. Perhaps a notation that this is coming from the ATLA database. If you have a look at the supplement, they've got some good advice there as well. Number 5 is pretty straightforward. It's a thesis, master's thesis, so you're always going to give the degree for which it was awarded as well. So it's a THM thesis, and there are a couple of quoted terms in the title, and I would set those with single quotations because the double quotations go around the title of this work. The basic rule of thumb is that if it's not an actual published work, the title goes in quotation marks rather than italic type. And you can see when that was finally submitted and approved and entered into the library there. Number 6 is a distributed class notes. You can have a look at the supplement to help you there. This is for the course RS101. For the fall of 2005, these notes were distributed, so that's what you would put in the bibliographic note and in any footnote that you use to do that. Just as a word of caution with using unpublished sources, you should prefer published sources over unpublished sources, which means that you should also look to see if the same author has published his work elsewhere, where it's been peer-reviewed, for instance. And also, you should probably try to rely as much as possible on published sources before you cite or before you rely on the unpublished sources. It's okay to include both, but if you rely only on unpublished sources, your research looks a little thin. Number 7 is a complex example. It's the Brown-Driver-Briggs lexicon, the Hebrew and English lexicon of the Old Testament. Some of this title information you should probably consider marketing as well. I would consider Brown, Driver, and Briggs to be the editors here. 1907 is the date there. Number 8, you've got a really good example of this, of how to cite the Greek-English lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian literature, the 3rd edition, edited and revised by Dr. Danker. Note here that the author's name is Walter Bauer. So Danker is an editor and reviser of this work, so treat that accordingly. But you do have a good example of this in the DTS supplement, so you can look up how to cite this particular work. Number 9 is a more complex example here as well. This is one that typically throws people off. But you'll notice that the notation at the top of this page notes that it's a book in a series. Includes series title and volume number. Editors are optional. So notice that Word Biblical Commentary is the series title, and this is volume 30 in the series. Again, you can check the 8th edition of Turabian, section 17.1.5 for how to handle the series. Also, when citing especially commentary series, often the editors can be omitted. It's important to be consistent throughout, so if you decide to omit the series editors from biblical commentary series, then do that throughout your bibliography. If you decide to include it, try to include it for each one that has a series editor. So I think most people will opt for leaving it out, because the series editors usually don't have as great a role in producing the content for that commentary. Last is a multi-volume work with a single volume being cited here. And you'll notice that this is volume 1 of Louis Sperry Chafer's Systematic Theology. So the title of volume 1 is Prolegomena Bibliology, Theology Proper. Section 17.1.4.1 in the 8th edition of Turabian will give you a good example there. The Nephesis example is a good one to follow here. The handwritten note on the photocopy of the title page notes the publication date for volume 1 is 1947. So if you're citing just this volume, the publication date should be 1947. That's what we'd like you to do for this example. If you were doing a more extensive paper that relied the entirety of this work, then you would cite it slightly differently. You would cite it as Systematic Theology, the collection of 8 volumes. So it'd be a multi-volume work with multiple volumes, but you wouldn't bother giving the subtitles or the volume titles, as it were, for this series of books. I hope that this brief walkthrough of the bibliographic sources for modules 5 and 6 has been helpful to you. So get to work.